Coming to you straight from the Rio Grande and beyond. Broadcasting to the four corners of the globe. So grab your seat, your coffee, or your sundowner.
Okay, everybody, here we go.
On point, as always. This is Gloves Off. Gloves Off.
So when I was working on Selena, the series for Netflix, to play the role of Abraham Quintanilla, I put on a specific amount of weight, which I was fine doing, but also realizing it could be difficult to get that weight off. I got back into my physical regimen with James Leha, but I was still having trouble with just those last amounts. And that's when I got to meet Arturo from Laredo Medical Weight Loss Clinic. And just the products that he gave me kind of put me over the edge. I feel great about myself.
Hi, I'm Don McLaughlin. I'm a candidate for House District 80, which consists of Webb County, Uvalde County, Dimmitt County, Zavala County, Frio County, and Atascosa County. I'm also a small businessman, and I know what it takes to run a small business. And for too long, we've had too much government regulation coming into our small business and making it tougher and tougher for us to survive and get by. And that's one of the things I hope to change. Small business is the backbone of the state of Texas, and we need to make sure it thrives and that they have the support they need in government and less government regulation.
Back at you and Gloves Off, and I have a dear friend of mine from California. We're touching base on martial arts, the culture of martial arts, the reasons why, what is the importance of cross-training in martial arts at a certain level with Sifu Jason Jones. How you doing, my friend? You doing good?
Doing excellent. How are you doing, sir?
Good. And we're just talking about the weather a little bit ago before going on, and it's amazing that you guys are, I always think of you all being as hot as we are, but not really.
It kind of comes in waves. But usually about the hottest we get is like about 110, but then it kind of just cools off after that. Right now we're going through a little bit of a surprise heat wave, but then next week we're back into the 80s. But
right,
it's good farming weather.
Oh, here, I was telling you, from April, now we're in September. It's been over 100, 105 every day. To dissipate, it'll start cooling down in October. In a couple of weeks, it'll start kind of going into the 90s. It'll hit 100s every so often. Then November, it'll go down to about 70s. Then Thanksgiving, all of a sudden, it'll just drop. Drop dramatically into the 30s and stuff like that.
Right now we're in almond season, going into tomato season, where it's kind of like the heat spike had stopped and it kind of goes down, so they get all the tomatoes. And then after that, when it starts to finally cool off and we get the first freezes around February or so, we go into orange season and stuff like that, citruses.
Right.
But yeah.
You live in a part of California that's a lot of harvesting and a lot of farmland.
Yeah, it's very rural, and that's actually ties in really well with the martial arts. I've been fortunate to been able to train with some of the Filipino masters that have come through, because they come from back in the 30s and the 40s and 50s. They came to Stockton and for agriculture, and it settled there because of the agriculture. So it's kind of a cool thing to be where I'm at. And then of course, and then I'm about 2 hours away from the Bay Area too. So there's a lot of Kung Fu and Kempo and all that good stuff there too. So,
yeah, absolutely. And talk a little bit about, because you mentioned something here about the Filipino culture and in that area, and basically Stockton, that area where you're at, is a mecca of the Filipino martial arts. Really, I would say that.
Oh yeah, I would absolutely say that. I mean, you had Bahala Na, the Sarada guys, Angel Cabales in Stockton, and growing up as a kid, I had a neighbor and I didn't even know what they were doing, but they would be next door having like parties and stuff, and their uncles would be out in back playing with sticks, and I didn't know it was even a martial art at that time. But yeah, it's very cool to early on, I'd only been in the martial arts probably about 2 or 3 years, and my Kempo instructor, Sifu Evans, he had brought in some guys to teach stick and knife, and he's like, "Oh, you got to come to this special class," because I'm like, "Oh, okay." And at that point, I think I was like a green or a brown belt or something like that, and so I thought, had all the knife techniques and all those. And I saw the first thing I saw was Guru Carlito Banja sitting in a chair with a gentleman named Makia Foster, and they were doing, which I didn't even know what it was at the time, but they were doing hubud with live Bali songs, and I saw it and it just blew my mind. But yeah, I feel very fortunate to be where I'm at, and having been exposed to so many great martial artists just because of proximity to Stockton. You know,
Absolutely.
but,
With the Savat, which I grew up with, and in my college days, I did other arts, and I got involved with Aikijits, and I also got involved with Kempo. And my Sifu, kind of a special individual because he grew up in Hawaii. He grew up with Parker. He grew up with Emperado's brother.
wow.
He grew up with Chow, and he got his black from Chow, and he got it also from Emperado. And then all of a sudden, when the Gaju Kembo, before Gaju Kembo was even Gaju Kembo, and then went into Vietnam, comes back and starts with Mr. Parker. So he was very formidable in what he used to call Kempo. And he used to actually say Kempo comes from Hawaii, even though the origins are both Chinese and Japanese.
Yeah.
From Hawaii, it was a mixed melting pot. And American Kempo was refined here in what it is now, right? And Gaju Kempo as well. And they're tough arts, and they're tough individuals. That's what I tell people.
Well,
If
I believe you. Yeah, I mean, I believe the personality that Kempo has, and Kaji Kempo as well, it has that root and maybe like Okinawan Chinese art, but it's definitely got a lot of Hawaiian in it. And what they were, the Emperado brothers and all those early Kaju guys and Parker and all those guys, when they brought it over here, they could use it. And it was a little bit more fluid than Japanese karate, not quite as flowery as Kung Fu. And they really knew what they wanted to do with it. I agree with you though. I believe that the Kempo, for me, it's been a great base art because being that it already has like the flavors of some of your karate and your Kung Fu and maybe some of the early like the Danzanryu Jiu-Jitsu kind of like in there already. And then what Mr. Parker did with it was, add in a lot more like the Chinese influence and some higher kicks and stuff like that. But yeah, it blends well even with something like Salat. The use of angulation and the overall thought behind things. Yeah, it's been a lifelong art for me. I've been studying it for a little over 30 years now. Different variations of it. But
and the basis of Kempo, your Kempo was Gaju Kempo or Parker Kempo?
When I started, and this was in my teens, I had started originally started in an Ed Parker school, but was only there for a few months. And then my family and I moved, and luckily where we ended up, there was a Kempo school, and it was a kind of mix of Tracy Kempo, but my Sifu at the time, he had, so just like a couple months before me and my younger brother started there, had started training with Jeff Speakman. So it was in a kind of weird transitional phase, but he also taught a lot of Kung Fu. So believe it or not, when I was a young kid, I was doing a lot of the wushu forms, like the Nanquan, like the Southern boxing and tiger and crane sets and tornado kicks and stuff like that. But also he made us also learn Tai Chi, which I actually thank him for now. That's one of the things as I've grown older, being able to like go, oh, hey, there's still these arts that kind of, you know, I'm approaching. I'm 48 right now, and the clang and bang style that I started out when I was a kid isn't maybe the same that as it used to be. So doing things like some of the salad and some of those slow Tai Chi forms, they're not so bad anymore.
Yeah, you know, and yeah, I grew up with that mentality of his was always learn from others before. You don't want to see it the first hand and the first time in the street.
Right.
So I was thrown to an open mind of understanding other arts, learn, study them, not just pick something and mash it. No, you respect the art for what the art is, bring it to yourself, you yourself incorporate it in whichever way you want to do it, and then take it out there. So nowadays, you know, we teach capoeira. My wife and I teach capoeira at school.
Yeah, excellent.
We teach, of course, the savate, and you teach the Kempo. And in the savate, you also have so many different appendage bodies and concurrent disciplines, right? The concurrent disciplines and appendage disciplines. That when you're teach, you kind of already mixing it. You know, I would say that's a mixed martial arts because they had so much stuff going on in the 1800s that they were still teaching it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people know savate now because of a contemporary of kind of it's a boxing sport in the ring. Yes. You know, it's a ring. It's a ring. So a lot of people do not understand the ring or know the ring savvy of it, but have done seminars about the basic techniques there, and they take off with it. But it's an
popular amongst a lot of the JKD guys for quite a
lot
while.
of the guys train in that portion of savate, which we all call contemporary savate. You know, it's just something that rolls around in the workshop arenas, and it's really never getting expounded. It's always the same thing, and you can see it in some areas here, and you see it in other countries. They've never gone or trained in the school, or lived in the school, or lived the life of a saboteur for them to realize what it is. It's kind of like boxing is now. You know, everybody's kind of teaching boxing, but very few have been inside a boxing gym and grew up in the boxing gym.
Yeah,
to understand the feel and, you know, that knuckle dragging attitude that they have, but they can throw a jab and a cross, but they don't really know the fine entities of it.
You know, that's one of the things that's funny is when I started out as a Kempo guy, I thought my hands were pretty good. I was pretty good on tournament circuit and all the stuff, you know, hands, kicks, all of them. I thought I was pretty fast. But a few years, I was probably in my early 20s. I started doing Chikundo, PFS, like the Bunak stuff, and my instructors taught out of a boxing gym, and so we were learning some of the Junfan boxing and some of the drills. And then one of the guys at the gym that owned the gym, they needed somebody to spar with one of their guys that was coming up in boxing. So I thought I was pretty good. Man, I got lit up 10 ways from Sunday. I had never been punched in the face that much, and I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. You know, it's really boxing in and of itself is an eye opener. But it's savate. I always was very impressed a lot with the and my understanding of it is very rudimentary, but the use of the shoe in the Vince Dans LaRue, is that the
Dance Deru, yes.
Dans LaRue?
That,
But the idea of use of the shoe in combat, I was a bouncer for a few years as a young lad, and we would always wear like boots, and it was just like, oh yeah, makes perfect sense. Why wouldn't you? You know, and one of the guys I was a bouncer with was a American Kempo black belt. He's like, oh, that's James Bond stuff, you know. And I'm like, no, dude, let me kick you in the shin. He's like, oh, I get it. Oh, yeah, yeah. So I remember we were like just thinking of all these different, like, well, a lot of the Ed Parker foot maneuvers and stuff like that. All of a sudden, we're just like, you know, just from the use of the shoe. I think that's something that a lot of people who back when I was learning, you went into the dojo and you took your shoes off, no shoes ever, and then you put your boots on and feel sluggish, and then you also didn't know how to use it. So that was actually, I think I read an article in Inside Kung Fu or one of those magazines about Savat, and it just like was like, okay. And hearing Bunak talk about it back then, he was always very big proponent of it. So it was very cool.
You know, Savat used to know French before they changed the word to chasseur, right? It means shoe.
Yeah.
It means shoe. So kicking with shoes on, kicking barefooted are two different worlds. And the movement places itself. You know, you're on your toes just like a boxer, and in function of it. So when you have cobblestone streets, you can move with your shoes on. If you're barefooted in the streets, it's kind of you know. So I'm not saying that you can't kick barefooted. I'm just saying that the kicking different, the positioning is different.
Well, and the movement. Just being, I mean, if you're outside and you're on the street, I can tell you, like, you know, if you're not wearing shoes and you're kicking and fighting, your feet get tore up. It's not the same as being in the dojo.
Every martial art has its reason for why it was developed, and that was the reason that being developed. Then, of course, it became a pugilist art inside the ring, and so on and so forth, and it went in there, and that's the history of it. But here's the main question: there's a lot of things going on now. There's a lot of schools that are cross training. Oh, I like that. I like that kick from over there, so I'm going to incorporate. Oh, I like that capoeira kick. I'm going to incorporate. I like the Thai kick. I like the Thai elbow. I'm going to do that from here. And they kind of incorporate it and mishmash it in their own. To me, I'm like, great. But to me, I'm like, learn the arts before you do that. Learn a basic. How do you feel about that when they start cross-training?
I think exposure to other arts, but I think a lot of it is, initially it started out that back in the 80s, at least, in the 90s, when I started taking, you only studied your art. You know, a lot of cross training was really not until after like UFC kind of came out and the JKD mentality kind of people started cross training. But I think it swung like a pendulum. Like you never studied, you know, judo guys didn't train with karate guys who didn't train with boxers and then it swung all the way over here where you have a lot of people who are just, oh, that looks cool. Oh, that looks cool. Oh, I tried it, but it didn't work. And it's like, yeah, because you didn't invest the time into it.
Absolutely.
And I think having a base art, something that you can compare to others, is kind of a necessity, at least. Because if you don't have, it's like a house. If it doesn't have a strong base, it's just gonna crumble.
Absolutely. Right.
And I don't necessarily think that has to be a traditional art. I think it could be something like wrestling or boxing or jujitsu or whatever. but have something that you can kind of compare to. And then a lot of these guys, it's like almost like a fast food mentality where, well, just grab that and grab that without really knowing what it is. And sometimes they can make it work, sometimes they can't. But and I mean, I'll be honest. When I was a kid and sparring, we would watch Bruce Lee videos to try and like emulate what he was doing, even though it wasn't what we were doing. So you steal from the best. But
yeah, you still beg and borrow, right? But and I'm with you 100% with what you're saying. You're always going to see if you're a good fighter and your mentality is about fighting, or you're going to try to see what somebody else has to innovate yourself into it,
sure.
or to understand how to defend yourself against it. And you saw that with a Gaju Kembo mentality. All it was all came in. That's what Gaju Kembo basically means for. And so people say, no, but it's a traditional art. No, they mixed a bunch of arts together into producing what they did, and it's a very effective art.
But that's why that's why I think Kaji Kimbo did it right.
Yeah,
they have a base art. You have, I mean, and whether that's Emperado method, or if you're Ramos method or Gaylord method, there's still kind of a unifying thing that you have punch techniques, you have your grab techniques, you have your basis, and whether you agree with kata or not, that's kind of whatever, but you have a basic foundation that you can bring somebody up from white belt to black belt and be pretty sure that they're going to be pretty good in all areas. And a lot of people like gravitate more to like the kung fu side. Like if you look at like Aldo Coscos's the
Yes.
One Hop Kudo is very gung fu, but they all have the same basics as what you would have from any of the other methods. And Kaji Kimbo, for me, like a lot of it is they have their base style, but they can also go into like something like Kakoi Dosaparas or like Grandmaster Phil Jelena from Canada. He is a senior grandmaster at Kaji Kimbo, one of the highest ranked Tuhans in Bikini Turksha. And he's also, and he does MMA and everything else. I believe he was one of George St. Pierre's like first like coaches. But he has a foundation that he can, and I think for teaching wise, that's pretty important to have at least a method to get somebody from point A to point B, or even like all the way to Z. If an art is able to like something like American Kimbo, Mr. Parker designed it as a such that I believe like you can have his art, and then he didn't really design it as a knife fighting art or a stick fighting art, but it has that in it. And so if you go outside of the art and study, I don't know, like modern Arnis, you can pull from that and express it within your version of American Kimbo.
You're correct. But these arts, those guys, all of them, because they all cross-trained.
Yeah.
Parker, Grandmaster Parker cross-trained, Grandmaster Emperado, they all cross-trained. Look, and they were all studying, and they're always learning. And he took from a lot of people, everybody, and they redefined it to their body types, to what it was, And I'm with you. There wasn't too much of like Shotokan or Wataru. This is A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. It has to be done this way. And I feel this, if Savat would have been around as openly as it was in the 60s, because it wasn't, you would have seen that influence inside American Kempo and Gaju Kempo.
Oh, sure.
Without, they all knew that Savat existed, it was just not as open to the public as it was before. Kind of like Eskrima and the Silat, they all knew it existed. That's why Mr. Inosanto went towards back, because it was Ed Parker, man. And then he went back to learn the arts from Steve. So a lot of people do not understand it. And you look at some of the, and that's what I love about Stockton. They all respect each other. They all understand. They all understand each other. Everybody on the outside that's never been around them, they all kind of bicker and everybody else. But once you go there, they're all cross training. They're all teaching. All the students have been used to 2, 3, or 4 or 5 different instructors while they're teaching, and they're always progressing, moving forward, always evolving.
If you look at like a lot of the early guys, like Dintoy Revlar, or Mike and Ian, they all kind of had, they all trained with Angel, but they all also trained with Hiron, and some of them had, like Guru Dan Inosanto, like, he studied with everybody. But that original Stockton area, I think part of it was they were all part of the same overall community. A lot of them were Masons. A lot of them belonged to the same lodges. And I'll say, like, a lot of it was just backyard training. And for me, that's always been great. Like, a lot of my first and some of my best training that I've ever done has been learning in somebody's backyard, because a lot of the formality and a lot of the guru this and that isn't really as much as you have a beer and they say, okay, now you try hitting a stick, and then you get lit up, but you learn.
You're absolutely correct, and you see that, and it was family knit units. My uncle used to say, I'm gonna translate it from Spanish to English. He used to say, "Cipotas for the street and boxing's for the ring." He taught boxing to everybody, but for him to teach you cipota, you had to be very, very close to him for him to teach. You have several that learned, that there's that are still around, that laugh about it. They didn't know what they were learning, and until later on, they were doing it. But it was used more as a type of, this is what's going to happen to you in the street. You better be better than that other person up there.
Right, kind of a secret weapon. Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. That's the way I've always perceived the martial arts. You train for yourself, for your betterment. You respect every single one of them that's there. Yeah. And you look at everybody, but don't mishmash it. Understand what it is. And if you like it, go train with them. That's what I did that. When the first time I saw Carlito, I started learning from him. And every single other one that came in, Art and everybody else, and just you learn and you learn. Yeah. And that's just that's the way it is, and a lot of people do not have that luxury to be picking and choosing. And the worst part is going to a place, and I say this openly, where a person that is just picking and choosing to make something seem good that doesn't have any.
Gotcha.
And well, that's just the draw of the game, I guess. If you go in there and start looking for schools, the older I get, you're like, well, start looking.
Though, it is quite an interesting thing so as a matter of fact, I just got done teaching. Several of my students are people that fight at the Dog Brothers gatherings.
Sure.
And I know a lot of people don't really know about it, but it's full contact, stick fighting, kicks, punch, elbow, grappling, everything goes. So it is nice to have different things to pull from. And one of the things we do too is you kind of look at what the general consensus of what almost everybody else's game is. In Dog Brothers, there happens to be a lot of people who do like the Kiri Tersha. So you look at what they do, and then you see, okay, well, since the majority of these guys are doing it, we'll come in over here like this because it's slightly different. And you might pull from something like Silat or something. Even a big one for us is I was fortunate enough to train in Xingyi Kung Fu, which is an internal Chinese martial art, kind of similar to Tai Chi or that, but a little bit more straightforward than that. But there was a lot of spear work and staff work. It's something that can add to a game. But again, if we didn't have a basis to pull from, which is the foundation, we have the Kempo, but we add in from over here to kind of change the game a little bit. And then maybe what all these guys are doing. The way I look at it a lot is like, you guys, you remember Lyoto Machida, the UFC fighter? Well, in your mixed martial artist, generally speaking, if you put it as an atypical fighter, it would be like a Muay Thai mixed with some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, maybe some wrestling, maybe some boxing. And that's kind of like your nucleus of what your average fighter would be. And maybe a little bit more here, remember there on for one of them. But he came in, and where most guys were in the Muay Thai stand-up mentality, kind of square and everything, he came in as a karate guy and was doing in and out and not getting touched. His kicks were coming in straight. He even managed to knock Randy Couture out with what I would consider like a chicken kick. So sometimes adding something else to the game that maybe isn't on their radar is a necessity. And so that's one of the things I think as far as cross training. Another thing we do, or I do personally, is because of our wrestling background. My son is he wrestles, and I help coach him and stuff. We will add in some of the wrestling drills into a Kempo framework. So I like that idea of cross training. Early on, when I first started training, when you are only training with people who only do the same art as you, somebody says throw a hook, and they give you like one of these like big hooks because it's a haymaker or whatever, and not knowing, like a tight hook, that's what you're going to get hit with, is the guy that can actually throw it. So having actual wrestling defenses and stuff like that help out a lot. So that idea of cross blending, I think it's important to be open, but again, I'll say it again, I think it is a necessity to have at least a base art to work from and to build upon.
And I say a base art that you have to have enough, how can I say, time in when matured under somebody.
Yeah.
Then you branch off.
Yeah.
And a lot of people now do not have an intermediate level in anything, and they're already branching out, trying to do something else from all over the place.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. You can tell in the ring, and and you can see it in their students when they go fight. You can see the aftermath and everything else, and it's not about training tough.
Oh, right.
Yeah. It's about training correctly. And in Savate, we don't use shin guards unless you're hurt. Then you put on a shin guard for you not to hurt yourself more, right?
But
and a lot of people,
my students, when I first started learning, like there was no protection was like barely anything.
And I said, and the reason you do that is for you not to be accustomed to, I can kick as hard as I want, and I might hit your elbow and it's not going to do anything because I got that shin guard. But you hit an elbow at full speed, believe me, you're going to go down, and it's just going to be the one that has the most pain tolerance. And people don't see it. I see it in Savate now. I see a lot of videos coming out of Europe, and everybody's wearing shin guards. And you're like,
really?
No, leave it. Yeah, oh yeah.
Wow.
Say that against. I mean, I just say, okay, you want to train that way? Train that way.
Wow.
I
can kind of understand it for maybe kids, people coming up, but once you've been in it for a while, you should probably be able to do it without, right? But
you should do it without starting from the beginning. And the reason is because you want to learn how to respect the kick and learn how to respect it both ways, both offensively and defensively.
Absolutely.
And it's not about wailing on each other, which a lot of people misunderstand that I'm going to put on gloves in front of you and I'm going to hit you as hard as it's not about that. Because what happens is if you're beating up each other day in, day, you're going to end up hurting yourself in your head.
Yeah.
And you're going to have some injuries, and people do not understand that. Not everybody in boxing is beating up each other inside the ring. You don't see that. And people say, oh, they're sparring. They might be sparring to a boxer is I'm getting, or to a saboteur is I'm preparing for a bout.
Yeah.
So it's a frame that I'm going to be with helmets, with shin guards. That's when I do wear my shin guards, because we're going a little bit harder every day because I'm preparing for a bout. If I wasn't preparing for the bout, I shouldn't need that.
Well, it's like I tell my guys before a dog brothers get. So we'll spar with live sticks, which rattan. But then about 2 to 3 weeks before, we'll switch over to like padded sticks. And usually a week before, I just tell them, hey, we're just doing drills, keeping cardio up, maybe some technical sparring, but that's always when the accident happens. Somebody breaks a finger. Oh, now I can't go. You don't want to go in, no, you'll never fight 100%, but you don't want to go in compromised. And so many dudes do that in MMA. You see it in wrestling. Some people the coaches will just grind their kids out 2 or 3 days before a tournament, and those kids are just wasted at the tournament because they don't have the gas. They're already sore. They're already beat up. Yeah. No,
you're correct. You're correct. So hopefully from this video, when people are coming in and watching this, they can understand what point we're coming from.
Yeah.
In the sense of training people, cross-train, yes, cross-train. And cross-train with a person that knows what they're doing in a style that's going to be beneficial for you, and try to see what you can get out of it. But I never try to mishmash it. That's my perspective.
Right.
Others might. It's their own objective. But that's the way it is, And I was already getting out of fighting in the ring when I blew my hand. So I trained people in both boxing and in Buitron Salat, right? And I trained many of them in the late 90s when USA Salat had a bunch of competitions, in the early 2000s when there was a lot of competitions of USA Salat. That's basically what we did. We trained them not only here, and they fought all over the place. But after a while, that kind of dissipated, and my main concern was learn for what it's for the street. Not that you're going to go out there looking for a fight.
No.
But learn you're going to need it. Be prepared. And I'm not trying to say paranoid, because that's a different story. But be prepared for what happens.
Well, and for me, like growing up as a kid around here, like I said, it's very rural. And so we're right off the California 99 interstate. So this interstate goes all the way down from San Diego, Mexico, all the way up to Oregon. And so some of the towns around here can be kind of rough and have a lot of drug traffic and stuff like that go through there just because of that freeway. And towns like Stockton and Oakland and then here like Modesto, it can be a rough area for a kid. I think it's very important for young people and older people to get some training. As a kid, I didn't really. I got in quite a few scraps, and then that's literally why I went and learned martial arts. I'm 6'2", so it was out, 6'2" white boy like sticking out and would be the guy that they come up to first because everyone wants to take out the big guy. But I think it's a definite importance. I teach my children I'm very adamant about that, just because um, you never know, and there's so many people out there that do not have right meaning, in their life. They want to like cause harm to other people, and kids in high school, like my son's high school, it happens all the time. And it's funny
Sure.
because my son Killian, he'll come back to me. He's like, Dad, I saw a fight at school today. I'm like, oh yeah. He's like, man, their techniques. I'm like, dude, it's cool, it's cool. But yeah, and even if it's not martial arts, I think getting kids into like wrestling or boxing or something, which I can consider both martial arts, but not maybe traditional like Asian arts. Um, I think it's important, and I think as a culture, um, the United States is a little behind on that. Um, if you look, there's a large Sikh community where we're at, and the Sikhs are from India, but they actually have their own martial art that they teach within their community, Gatka, and it's very impressive. And they teach sticks, knives. They even teach nets, and they teach their community from a young age. And
Well, last year we had Grudev, excuse me for interrupting, come in from, and he was in Canada,
mhm.
but he's also in India, and you can see the style is not Gatha, it's Vishna-ish. It's a very
That's not
you'll
good
see
yet.
him right.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's so cool.
yeah, and it's a good school. How he teaches, the reality basis of it, it's a very impressive art, and you need to understand it. Open your eyes to what's out there and learn.
Well,
Because fighting is different, and fighting is different in every culture. We're here in the American culture, and what I've seen the difference between the American culture from the European, from
mhm.
the Latin, the Mexican to the Latin American culture to even the East is here. Everybody's a headhunter. Everybody wants to leave you with a
Right,
black eye, broken nose,
right.
and busted lip. A lot of these guys are going to go underneath you and they're going to do something else, and
Yep.
and they're going to leave you bleeding somehow else or hurt.
I,
And
I
people
think it's
don't.
I think it's a real shame too. Is like there's a large Portuguese community around here. A lot of it has to do with the dairies and stuff. But when I was a young kid in high school, uh, I remember going to they have what they call a festia, which is just a big festival, and they had a demonstration of jogo do pau, which is
Oh,
their staff fighting. And I was like, holy smokes. And my buddy's like, yeah, they keep trying to get me. I'm like, how are you not going to do this? Like, nah, it's just old man stuff. And I think it's a shame that a lot of that culture has left. And arts like that, it's just hard to learn. Um, when I was growing up too, it's like my grandmother was really into pro wrestling. And she had a friend that actually, yeah, I know it sounds like grandma in pro wrestling, but uh, that would talk about catch. And back then, I didn't know what it was. And he'd call it catching and hooking and stuff like that. But then growing up and getting older and being like, oh man, that was around and available. But so I think one thing too is as a culture, more people need to do it. Younger people need to be exposed to it, and a lot of times, you know, I know a lot of Kempo guys that have and stick fighting guys have gone and done HEMA because they wanted to reconnect with like European martial arts and stuff like that. So anything that can get people interested and also just having some kind of awareness and ability to defend themselves, even if it's something as simple as like, some Taekwondo classes, just something. There have been so many people that I've taught over the years that just didn't even know how to make a fist. I mean, I'm sure you've seen people do this before, You're like,
I saw that. I saw that here, and these people were actually paying money at a school and they were around that school. One of them was there for 7 years, the other one 5 years, and they came to me making a fit, and I was like, and when I corrected them, they got mad because one of them was a black belt, and I said, well, number one, learn how to make a fist. Who taught you that? That school over there? Well, good. But I look at stuff like that to me now, and I said, well, I rather prepare my students in case I ever have to deal with that school.
Absolutely.
Ahead. That's my mentality when I teach.
Mm-hmm.
You come to me, you're asking me to teach you something. So I'm going to teach you to you the best of my knowledge, and I'm going to be the best that you can be. Not,
absolutely.
I want you to have the best technique and the best awareness. I'm not saying you're not going to be beatable, because everybody's beatable. But what I'm talking about is that you're going. I'm doing this because I value my name, or else I'll be. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
If I didn't, I could care less how you made the fist, this way or like they used to fight in the old days.
Yeah.
And or they hit you this way, whatever. But I wouldn't care about your technique or you're doing it, your protectiveness, because we're all open every time we punch and kick. We're all open, or you struggle to stick as well. So how do we minimize that? How not to telegraph? Those are my objectives: how to make you better than you can be. And I guess it's work, because I got students that are still with me for, one of them is going to be there for 30 years now. The other one's 25, 27, 20. I have students that have been with me for a very long time.
But see, that's what I'm thinking about, having a base. You had a correct method of teaching them the basics so that they don't mess up, and you've shown how to minimize their movement, how to minimize mistakes, how to be non-telegraphic in attack. And you can't get that from just like grabbing from everywhere. You have to have some focus to hone it in. And maybe you're doing this over here and your focus is here, and you saw that and you went, oh, that works. Okay, maybe this is something like what I already have. So maybe this is a way of doing something that you already know.
Absolutely. The other day, and I don't make fun of any schools or not, but I ran into a gentleman at a store, and I was wearing a shirt that said Buitron Academy, and he started talking to me. That he was also an instructor of a school that he opened up, and he goes, we teach capoeira too. And I go, really? Well, who'd you learn capoeira from? That's great. Why don't we get together and start doing a whole? And it goes, he kind of looked at me bizarre, and I goes, no, we teach 2 or 3 of the kicks of capoeira. Then you don't know capoeira. Only because that's not capoeira, And so I was kind of like that. I just said, oh, okay, whatever. And I just, left on back. If I would have been 20, my 20s would have been a different conversation. Now it's kind of, okay, now I know what you're dealing with. But
capoeira as a cultural art. So my oldest son, he's on the spectrum. He's autistic, but when he was young, I wanted to give him into martial arts, and it was hard for me to train him. He didn't want to learn from me, so I found an instructor that was teaching capoeira. And Mr. Pato, I don't remember the SCAB system, but anyways, he teaches in oh man, Humboldt or Davis or something like that now. But my son absolutely loved it, because you learn the rhythm, you learn the movement, but you also learn the drum, the berimbau, and how that correlates to everything. So if you're saying you're teaching capoeira and you don't have it's I don't know. It would be just ridiculous.
When you just put your hand on the ground and you kick, okay, whatever. You know what I'm saying? But you can fool the masses, but you're not gonna fool the people that know. They always say a lie exists until the truth comes in. And
absolutely,
you don't want the truth to be your first time in a street fight. And you try to put thing off, and the kid that didn't do anything all his life puts you on the ground, and that's the reality of this thing.
Yeah,
that's the reality, and unfortunately, that's the end game of what hopefully never happens. I don't want anybody getting in a street fight or in a street altercation, but that's what the reality is on all this. Whether you're in the ring or whether you're not, that's where it's at. In the ring, of course, if you're training to compete for the ring, reality is in the ring, as soon as the bell goes on and off, that's when you're on. But in the street, it's a total different entity. And when you look at the guys in Stockton, they all understand that, and they have a relationship with that culture that's there because it's very much alive. And it's a beautiful culture because they're teaching you the reality of, because that's the end game.
Mhm.
And something.
Stockton, it's for one, it's those arts there are very much alive. They're very much part of a lot of the people there. You have a lot of masters there that nobody even knows about, that are just little old men walking around. But you have gentlemen like Mike Cardenas and Joel, and he's carrying on Bahala Nine. They're all there still carrying it on. But also, Stockton's a rough city. The opportunity to and potential for having to use your art, it's there. It's rough. But yeah, I think those arts too, because of most of them were used in real life around World War II and a little later after that time, and that the reality of it has not gone off into extreme forms and kata competitions like some arts have. So yeah, I fully the Stockton systems and a lot of the Filipino martial arts systems, even the more Bay Area, like Villabril, the Largusa style and stuff like that. Those guys still have the core of their art, and they still realize the reality of it. Still pretty tight knit, even though there's a lot more of it around on the internet now and stuff. I think they're still a pretty tight knit group, and you don't really know what it's about until you maybe touch hands with some of those cats, and you're like, oh, okay, I get it.
Absolutely.
But it's like Salat as well. I know you had a Mahaguru Stephen Plink at your school before.
Always, I'll tell you a brief sense of Silat. When we did a martial arts festival, the first time I ever saw Silat in France they called it Pencak Silat.
Mm-hmm.
And a demonstration, I was doing a demonstration with my professor, Patorel, we were all doing there. And the other guy was and he did some Pencak Silat. And I kind of looked at it and I said, okay, that was the first time I had ever seen Pencak Silat. Years later, we're trying to move USA Savat and to teach USA Savat the organization-wise, because it's like USA Boxing. So I did a seminar in the Los Angeles area. And we went to a martial art school. Not a school. We went to a martial art supply store.
Oh, yeah.
Famous I or something. I.
Yeah.
And I was walking out and I bumped into this gentleman, and lo and behold, the person that I bumped into was Pac Victor Dutour.
Yeah.
Laughing, joking, we started just outside, and he goes, "Oh, what? I was wearing a shirt that said USA Savat." And while the other guys went inside to buy their stuff, I stayed outside in the parking lot talking to them. And they come out. We went back inside, and he says, "Tomorrow we're opening up the new location. We're doing like an open house. We came to drop off flyers. I would like for you to go." And after the workshop that I'm giving in the morning to make coaches and everything else, I'll go over there. And the guys didn't want to go. They told me, "No, that guy's crazy, this, all this, and other stuff." And I said, "I want to go. Either you guys take me, or I'll just get a taxi and not go. I mean, I know where the hotel is. Here's the card where I'm staying at." So they took me to the place, and he had his other two brothers were there. One that passed away, which was Paul, and uncle, which is still very much alive, a great individual, great. If you ever meet him or see him. It's another
I actually got the chance to train with him once at a Masters on the Mountain in Truckee, California. It was a 2-day thing, and a lot of it was focused more on like internal like qigong and stuff. But holy smokes, that guy when he wants to move, it's scary. And
and there was a lot of things in common, and we started training and cross training. That's what. So I started teaching Savate at his school, and he had a Savate club there in his school. In fact, a couple of his guys became U.S. champions of Savate under in USA Savate, and that's how I met Stephen Plink. And Plink and I are like brothers, and he's an excellent individual, very dangerous man, very dangerous in what he's talking about, simplistic to the end, and it's you see it. And so it opened my eyes to all the other Shilats that are there. Start looking and seeing, and they're just interesting, great arts.
It's interesting because the first time I heard about you was actually probably roughly around 15, 16 years ago. My instructor was a student, my Silat instructor was a student under Pak Vic, Mike Choke, and I'm not sure if you had done a seminar at the Ring of Fire or one of those, but he had just seen you and he came back just talking all about it. And he's like, oh, Savate, but it's not the Savate that you know. And like, yeah, he was pretty stoked on that. And so that was the first time I heard about you. And then Grandmaster Art Gonzalez ended up having you out at Mace, and I was like, oh man, yeah, it was awesome. But
we'll do it again.
Yeah, it was great. I miss Grandmaster Art. He was a cool individual. I actually never a student of his, but like I learned so much from just being around him and at the seminars and stuff. His knife work was something else. I mean, and we had a lot of things in common with both Tejanos, and we used to come over here. And when he came over, we took him to a lot of the guys and also Guru Carlito. There used to be a couple of police officers that used to hang around with my uncles, and one of them started showing Art, GM Art, the knife and how he positioned it. Go, man, that's what my uncle did, and this everything else. So everything was in connection with these old guys, and they passed on. Luis was one of the police officers' name, and he passed on, and how way he held the blade, and Art's eyes lit up, and that was and I go, this is what they practiced, and this is how they did things. This is it, and he'll flip the knife, and he'll kind of put it in this way on your fingers, Yeah.
So made between your finger out this way, and my uncle used to do that, and he said. Just went off and goes, I've seen that before, and they did it that way because they were boxing you.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, kind of use it like a push dagger, kind of. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, that's cool.
It wasn't coming out this way; it was kind of coming out on the diagonal. So it's I don't have one with me, or else I'll show you. But it's interesting everything that went on. Art was an excellent individual. Everybody, you all are in a melting pot of martial arts. You have a lot of art masters, like you said. A lot of people don't even know it, and that humbleness and that is very much there. Yeah. But we will. And from our conversation, for those coming back into this, it's basically about people cross training and the necessity of it, but at the same time, do it correctly.
Absolutely.
And now, there's nothing wrong with you going out and looking for another art that you saw, especially some people have that tendency, like you said. I started with this art. I have to respect my instructor until I get that big. Sometimes you either outgrow the school yourself or you move out of town, go look for something else. Or you've gotten to the point and you say, sir, I'm still your student, but can I go learn that over there as well? Ask them. Yeah. They might even tell you, what? That person I don't want you to go learn from because he's not that good, but really that other man that lives on down that other street, that's the one that I want you to go train with. And you sometimes they'll open up to that.
one of the things that too is for me, like my initial teacher stopped teaching Kempo. And then so being young, I had found a Jeet Kune Do school, and of course being a black belt at the time, like, oh, I gotta learn, Bruce Lee stuff, and the Filipino martial arts had always intrigued me. So I learned that. But then later on, that same path of doing that stuff brought me kind of back into the Kempo Kaji Kempo, because my Salat teacher, he taught a mixture of Pakvik Sarak, and then Pakvik kind of kicked him and a few other guys out, and he was teaching a blend of Sarak and Manda Muda, and then he's like, yeah, and I also teach Kaji Kembo on Gaylord method. And so I was like, yeah, that's perfect. And so it helped me keep my roots, even though it wasn't the exact same Kempo that I had studied. It was another version. And then later on, I got very into stick fighting, like Dog Brothers and stuff like that. And I met my former teacher, Professor Yathana Tojikawa, and he taught Kikoa Kempo, which is kind of a combination of Kaji Kempo and Karaho, the Professor Chow's method.
Right, the Chow.
And under
systems.
Yeah, and it was cool because if you look, I mean, even though they're not the exact same thing, if you look at anything that kind of comes down from Professor Chow, there's kind of an underlying thread of similarity between them. And so being able to do that helped keep me, based while still being able to do stuff like some of the other arts, the stick fighting arts and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
And then, but yeah, I like I said, I having a base, and then also, like you had just said, if you're kind of here, but you kind of want to do that, you ask your instructor. Maybe it's something that he's interested in too, or sometimes we have falling outs with our instructors, and have to leave, and that's unfortunately something that happened with me. But being able to have a base and being able to have something that if you are going to be an instructor yourself, if you are, if you're whatever and you're not teaching anybody and you're not doing anything, do whatever you want. But if you are teaching people, you should have something to teach. And if you don't have a way of teaching them, at least some sort of methodology. And I think both Master Parker's methodology and the Imperato method, or any of the Kaji, they have a great way of building.
Right. You have a basis to understand. Same way with Savate, and then especially in Densu Savate, you have a base to know the level that you're training that person to.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
People have a silver glove. I was, a little bit of history of me. I'm not paying myself. I was the first American silver glove ever formed in France.
Wow.
First one. And when you look at that, people don't understand what it is. But a silver glove, maybe to some martial artists, might mean something, but out in the street doesn't mean diddly squat.
Sure. Right. Yeah, absolutely.
People say I'm a second generation Parker black belt. In the street doesn't mean diddly squat.
Yeah.
Well, who cares? So you're like, oh, okay. But when you look at things like that, it just means something for the school. But you have to have a curriculum to base yourself off.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 10 techniques. You learn these 10 techniques. You better know them before I can teach you the next 10 techniques. And and those techniques always have to progress in a different. They split out. They progress into different ideologies within the art. Sure. But you have to have that growth. If you're in a martial art and all of a sudden they show you and all of a sudden just do this and go to a tournament. Oh, you went to a tournament. You went to 3 tournaments and you got first place. Okay, now you're orange belt. Okay, you went to 5 more. Okay, here's your purple belt. You know what I'm saying? What is it?
That's the money. That's
yes.
what that is. That's the unfortunately a lot I don't know if it's as bad anymore, but I remember back in the 90s, there were a lot of the schools that were very much that. They were like, oh, hey, just keep coming, just keep paying, and here's another stripe, here's another stripe, here's another stripe, okay, and then you end up with a 12-year-old black belt, and you're like,
plenty of those running around here. You have I don't make fun or anything, but
it's okay.
if that's what you want to do, if I had my son and I wanted to teach him to defend himself when he grows up to be a man or going up there,
Yeah.
that's not where I'm going to place him.
No.
Understand what I'm saying?
a
But
lot of
if
people don't know.
you're absolutely correct. They don't know, and they go into a place, and the person they get, it's like they're snake oil salesman. That's what they're.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. There's so many people out there that, they're this degree, that degree, whatever, but can you even show it on them? Can you teach? Not can you even but to me that's each their own, as long as it's not like hurting anybody. But man, if you're giving people false information, or you're just taking their money, and I mean, most schools are not cheap around here. You're looking at $200 a month for twice a week maybe, and if you're not learning something of value, you're ripping people off. And that's,
here we charge anywhere between 150 to 200, and you're every day.
nah,
Now, if you come here every day and train,
but
you want to do capoeira, kempo, go right ahead. I'm not going to tell you no. The more you learn,
but you're a very high level teacher. That, I mean, that's actually, sir, you're not charging enough. But yeah, it's just one of those things. I mean, unfortunately too, and I'm sure you're, is like a lot of the karate schools and now it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu schools and are almost glorified daycare.
That's what people, and that snake oil salesman, unfortunately, attitude entered the martial arts, and and I think it's always been around, but but it's more prevalent now than anywhere else. The real test of it was coming back home at night when somebody tried to take you into dark, violent situation, and you came out of it, and whether you're a little kid or not, and that those situations may sometimes come to a kid that's 6 to 10 years old, or it can come to a man that's 50 to 50. It just depends on the luck of the straw. Sometimes you'll never come, and God bless those individuals. But in certain areas, in certain parts of town, in certain cities, in certain areas where people live, the chances for a violent situation kind of arises. It's there, and
especially
people need to.
more now.
Yeah, you have to understand here too. And people say, "Oh no, there's not that much crime." Really?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Really, it's a dangerous situation. But and we can't fix the world. But I'm so pleased that you think in that fashion, because I've seen you and I've watched you for a long time, and how you're always training and you're always cross training and you're always teaching other elements, because that's what it's all about. You have to grow, and sometimes you want to grow into a system and keep learning it. And something over here struggles with me. I'm going to find it somewhere else, and I'm going to put that piece of the puzzle inside. And that to me is how it should be within the martial arts. But again, I've had this conversation with many. Sometimes now the internet and YouTube has made it a lot easier to see and to contact people from across the globe when you didn't have that chance 10, 20, 50 years ago. You didn't have that chance. You understood it existed, but you couldn't tell. So some of these arts 40, 50 years ago, they didn't understand that another art existed. That was the only thing they had.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
They became very good at it. And you have to understand that now. And you see that now with Savate, you see that with boxing, and you see that with capoeira. You see that with all the arts. they'll look and you can see that it's capoeira stylistic in the groups. It might be a little bit different from group to group. They might be doing something. So now you wouldn't see them until you ended up going into the roda of capoeira,
Sure.
into the circle of capoeira, and you start playing the game. Then you see somebody do something else. But now you look up YouTube and you kind of see, you find out. But the same thing with fights.
Yeah.
Pro boxers used to study their opponents months ahead of time.
And they would have like this one videotape and watch it over and over until they had the ins and outs. But you know, it's funny because you mentioned that, because I was talking to my son the other night, and I'm like, you are so lucky, because when I was starting, so I was learning a lot of kung fu forms.
Right.
But we didn't have application to every single movement in the form at that time, because the teacher would teach it slowly in the traditional way. So me and my younger brother, we would go and we would buy kung fu movies, and we'd be like, that right there, that, you know, tiger and crane move. Oh, okay, that's that, you know. And I'm like, you don't have to do the hunting and be imaginative, you know. And we all, you know, it would just be like, we would wait to buy the new Inside Kung Fu magazine because maybe it had a interview with Ed Parker or Doc Fong or somebody like that. Like, oh, maybe we'll learn a little bit more about this Tai Chi set or some internal secret or something.
You know, I was with my son earlier today, and we are going over one of the forms in Kempo. And I said, no, it's this way. And I go, reference it. He goes, how? Look it up.
Right.
I go, all the forms, they're all in YouTube. Look it up.
Well, you know, what's crazy is because I came from a Tracy background, and we had long form. And it's very similar to the Parker system long form. But later on, when I was bouncing, one of my good buddies was a black belt in American Kempo under Sasha Williams, and his long four was so much more like just in depth and complete. So I remember going back, and then he let me borrow a videotape he had of Frank Trejo. And but again, it was like maybe a 15-minute video, and we would just watch it over, rewind, watch it. Oh, rewind it, and just to try and get it perfect. And
you know, Frank Trejo was the one that started out my son in Kempo when he was 5 years old. My son's 20 years old now.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I was a big fan of his.
Miss him a lot. You know, there's a picture that came up in memories was when I was messing around with the phone, and I ended up taking a selfie.
Yeah.
And it was right after Huck Planis, Grandmaster Huck Planis, called me that Frank had just passed away. And today it came out in memories. And I was like,
wow.
Okay.
It's funny too, because my son, he's been learning to play guitar, and so of course I'm showing him Van Halen, and I'm like, see the singer there?
They did, Camp.
Yeah, David Lee Roth was a student of Frank Trejo, and Frank Trejo was his bodyguard too. And he's like, no way. And then I found a video, and he's like, what? I'm like, see, it's all connected. It's all there.
That David Lee Roth's father, Dr. Roth, was also a Parker black belt.
Really? Oh, that's awesome. Well, that explains a lot then. That's really cool. Yeah.
The things they also told me about Billy Idol was one of Frank Trejo's students.
You want to hear something crazy? Is the Van Halen brothers, Edward and Alex. Well, they're Dutch Indonesian, and I a few years ago met a little old lady that I was working in a music store, and I was doing a juru just often, and she's like, Sila, and I'm like, yeah, you, and she was like, oh well, I'm Dutch Indo and all that stuff, and then her son's like, yeah, she used to babysit the Van Halen brothers, and I'm like, no way. She's like, yeah, they knew some Salat. I'm like, no way. She's like, no, they did. Their dad. And I'm like, that is. But yeah, it's funny how it's all connected.
It's all connected. And the main thing I say here is I tell this is it's not about making fun, it's about making sure.
Hmm. Yeah.
And we'll get together soon. I spoke with Carlito earlier today because you all in your all's area lost a great individual this past weekend, which was Grandmaster.
I mean, let's do it. Yeah, that man right there. I met him once, and he demonstrated his double stick, and holy smokes, it was so complex and like nothing else. And I'd been around the Filipino martial arts for almost 30 years at that point, and it was just like, what? And the other thing about that man that I will never forget, he had one of the firmest handshakes ever. Super nice gentleman. I mean, and he walked into the room and everybody was like, knew who he was. It's a big loss. But
a big loss. He was the most humblest man. The last time I spoke with him was about a year ago. Last year, actually, not a year ago, months ago, December.
Mm-hmm.
And the last time I saw him was when I guess I went out there with Guru Art over there to the Mace.
Yeah. That was probably the same where I'd seen him. Guru Mike or Maestro Mike has Cardenas has a great video of him playing ukulele and singing at that there. That's so cool. Just in the middle of
say hi to Mike, another great individual. We have to.
Yeah, super great guy. Yeah.
But I want to thank you for your time and to share their journey and to share you that everybody kind of thinks alike at the end.
Well, I want to thank you, sir. I mean, you've been a definite inspiration, and thank you for sharing your art with us over all the years. And even at that seminar that you taught out there, I went away with stuff that I was like, oh, that's some cool material. And I've always thought very, very highly of you, sir. And I appreciate you having me on your show.
Well, thank you, and it's humbling to hear that. And we'll do it again sometime. I'll talk to Carlito. Let's see what we can do.
Absolutely, that'd be great.
Go over there. We'll go over there. We'll do something. Maybe everything goes kind of shut off since 2020 this way, but
right.
I think it's time for us to start moving forward. I'll leave you with this. Safe. And until next time, much peace. Have you ever wondered about what happens in a martial arts studio? Well, you start right away by setting goals, building determination, gaining focus, building skills, all while becoming more fit, gaining confidence, and learning self-defense. Buitron Academy is a school where attitude meets aptitude. So give us a call at 956-401-4868.